Today we talk about research design. Research design is a logical process for us to understand because we have a research problem. And with the research problem, we lay out our research purpose, right? And then we need to collect data. But before we try to collect data, we need to ask one important question. What are the data we need to collect? What are the data we need to collect? So this is very important. That's why we need to have a research design before we really involve ourselves into the field of data collection. Research design. Okay, and this is our goals for this week. We just try to understand the definition and functions of our research design. So let's take a look. What is the research design? And what is it useful for us to collect data? Let's talk about definition. It's an action plan, a structure, or a strategy or investigation. We create it so that we can use it to obtain answers to research questions or problems. Basically, we try to collect data, right? But we do not just get into the field and say, hey, I'm going to collect data. No, we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan for that. And this plan is very important because we have to follow all the logical considerations about what kind of data we want to collect. For example, if I want to understand your level of understanding about environmental protection, right? So environmental protection happens first, and you are here. So I go to collect your one-time data. Good enough. Can I collect any data that is happening yesterday about your thought? No, I cannot, right? I cannot just go back to just like I have a time machine. I went back 2-3 years ago and asking how you feel about our environmental protection. I cannot do that, right? So everything is about logic. Okay, so basically it's a plan. It's very important. Okay, next time, don't be late for the second class. It's strange. Why do you want to go out and then come back so late? It's 25 minutes already. It seems that you do not have a very good reasons to go out, right? Unless you do indeed have, please tell me. But don't do this. It's a wasting of time. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and the 3 gentlemen over there too. You are late. Strange. Okay. Don't do this. So basically, it's a plan. You need to have a plan so that you can go to collect data. So remember, basically, before you do, you have a plan. That's it. Very simple, right? So research design is basically a plan for you to collect data. That's it. Okay? And it is a blueprint or detailed plan for how a research study is to complete. See? We have a plan and we follow this blueprint, so step by step. So this is the blueprint, this is a detailed plan, and we follow it. So we follow certain procedures. This is a process. This is a process out there. So we follow this process. There's a rationale out there because we know we have to do A, then we do B, and do C. So it's a procedural plan that is adopted by the researcher. Who did this? Of course, you, the researcher, to answer questions. And this is very important. We try to answer questions validly, objectively, accurately, and economically. Validity means that our data should be valid enough to answer our research questions, right? And also we try to collect data that can objectively reflect our answers. And also the answers should be accurate. And also what is the meaning of economically? Economically means that we put less input and have more output. We call the so-called cost efficient. If that is a cost efficient, then that is good, right? Okay, so we keep in mind, this is the procedural plan. It's a blueprint. It helps us to validly, objectively, accurately, and economically to collect data that we need to answer our research questions and fulfill our research purpose. Very simple, right? Okay, all that said is still very confusing. Very confusing, but it's okay. Later I will give you a very clear idea. So, what are their functions? Well, basically it's an operational plan. See, we need to take action. So it is an operational plan to undertake the various procedures and tasks required to complete your study. So you imagine this, you have a research purpose, right? You know you want to collect data. You know you want to analyze data. What about the process? What are you going to need? What are the things you need to do? There must be some procedures out there, right? Then this is the job for the research design. Only you have designed this, then you can follow and you can have the answers. And you have to ensure these procedures are adequate to obtain valid, objective, and accurate answers. So this is not only an operational plan. You design it so that you want to make sure they can obtain, this is very important, valid, objective, and accurate answers to the research questions. Straightforward. So basically for now, you can think of research design as an action plan, as a blueprint, as a detailed schedule for you to figure out what kind of data you need to collect, so that you can validly, objectively, accurately, and economically answer your questions. Okay? So imagine this. Since this is a plan, this is a strategic process you need to take. Before you have this, there is no way for you to think of research instrument, to think about data analysis procedure. There is no way, because you do not have a plan yet, right? Okay, so a plan is more important than all the actions followed after it. So research design is the plan. Okay, so let's talk about the plan. So basic concept of research design, and here I just give you a very simple two ideas. They are very important, but very simple. That is, no designs are threat-proof. It's some kind of strange. That is, it doesn't matter what kind of design you are using, what kind of research design you are using. There are always threats out there. What are the definitions for threats? Threats means that when you conduct a research, there are always internal factors or external factors out there that might influence the result of your study, to which you have no control. You have no ability to manipulate. Let me give you one idea. For example, I have 2 boxes of mice, right? COVID-19 is so famous today, popular today, everyone talk about that. So I have 2 boxes of mice. In each of the boxes, there are 100 mice. Okay, 100 mice infected by COVID-19. The other 100 mice infected by general influenza, flu. Okay, so 2, right? So I give them some medicine. This one is a new medicine, and this one is placebo, just vitamin, sugar, and so on, right? Okay. So supposedly, after 1 month of experiment, I try to know how many mice here still survive, and what about the other one? Okay, so I have a control group, I have an experiment group. So ideally, after 1 month of the study, if they all survive, that would be fine, right? Because by the end of the time, I can compare these two groups, control group and experiment group. But unfortunately, because one night, suddenly the electricity just shut out. No electricity. And the laboratory became so hot and all died. What? Who caused the death? All died, right? And this kind of sudden surge of electricity is part of the threat. I have no control. Who knows, right? So this is the threat. There may be another threat. For example, when I select these 2 boxes of mice, okay, supposedly I need to use a randomization. So they should be equal in their general characteristics, right? But strangely enough, the one I selected for this box, although I use randomization, but they are super mice, never die. Although they are infected by COVID-19, never die. And by the end of the time, 100 mice still survive there. Strange. What happened to this? What happened to this? And this kind of selection bias, and I have no way to manipulate it because it just happened. Super mice and the weak mice. We have 2 boxes out there. Although the other box is the so-called control group. The mice in the control group are not infected by COVID-19, but they all died in 10 days. But their deaths are not because of flu. Their deaths because they are weak. Who knows, right? Only God knows. So there are many variables out there we cannot control that may have influences towards our experiment, our study. And those kind of influences are called threats. Okay, first. And the second one is control. Control. Why do we need to have control? We need to compare. We always need to compare. Remember the 2 boxes of mice, right? One is the control group. The other one is the experiment group. I need to understand whether the experiment I used here is effective. So in order to know the effect, I need something to be compared with. So I have a control group. Is that right? For example, I can have another experiment on you. For example, this year I have a new method of teaching research methodology. Wow, that would be great. So I divide the student into 2 halves. One group, I use my traditional way that I used for the past few years. So you are traditional class. And this one, I used my new approach of teaching research methodology. So you are the experimental group. You are under the experiment. You are the control group, right? So let's say before I commenced my teaching, I give you a test about it's an aptitude test about your knowledge for research methodology. This group, let's say, so look here, we have a very simple. Now, we have 2 groups, right? And this group, before I use a test, you got this. You are experiment group, and this is the so-called control group. Experiment group and control group. And experiment group, before I deliver my teaching, this group, the control group, gets 65 in average. Well, theoretically, you should be close, right? So you also get 60, let's say 64. It's very close. Statistically, these 2 averages do not have very significant difference. It's good. So now I'm going to teach my new method. So you receive my teaching, experiment group, right? But the control group receive my old method, so they do not receive X, the new treatment. So after 1 semester, then I give you another test. Okay, now this one. This one is 85. And this one, although we may have a figure, but it can have a many different versions of explanation. Let's say for now is 80. 80, right? Okay. We use this experiment group and a control group. We can compare a result. So both groups start roughly about the same, right? But by the end of the semester, look here, this group, experiment group, received the treatment, my experiment. You are getting 85 and the other group is getting 80. Okay, it seems that you get 5 points more, right? Okay, 5 more. So ideally, this seems to be something I'm looking for, or I try to verify. I try to prove that my teaching is good, right? So I like this kind of result. Of course, as a teacher I like my new way of teaching is good. But, how about this? By the end of the semester, you get 85, but the control group, my all the way, is getting 92. Huh? That's very strange, right? Okay. So it would be very difficult for me to explain this result because originally I thought my new teaching, so I could have 2 propositions. What is proposition? It's a hypothesis. What kind of hypothesis for this phenomenon? This is already happened, right? So I need to give you a tentative, reasonable explanation. I will say, okay, 1, maybe my teaching method for research methodology is not that effective as I thought. Okay? For 1, 对不对？了解吗？ This is number 1. And number 2, we have to consider the possibility of threats. What is the threats? This group of students. Throughout the teaching of this semester, you sense that you are neglected by me. You are so angry. So you form your own group. You started by yourself. So you put more efforts on yourself. There's nothing caused by me, right? I did not teach you to study harder. But you know, I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose. So in the end, you get higher score. And then what happened to this? What happened to the higher score in this group, control group? Well, it's because of the threats. The variables that may affect the result of the study from outside or from inside. So these are the threats. But basically, we have to know threats or control always appear when we consider about the research design. And did you see the control here? I point out 2 ways to make control. One is randomization. The other one is matching. When we try to control, we try to make another group for comparison, another comparison group that should be equal to the experiment group. In this case, this is the experiment group, right? And this is the control group. Then let's think about this. They should be equal, or otherwise it will be very difficult to compare. So there are 2 ways to make this kind of equality. One is through randomization. We have 41 students here. So before, in the beginning of the semester, I use computer to randomize and choose, put you into 2 randomized groups. Okay, randomization, right? And sometimes you cannot use random selection to select your group. Why? Sometimes. Why? Because we are human beings. No one likes to be selected in this way, right? Do you like to? Just because you are lucky to be selected? No. Or, for example, if we want to compare our English proficiency and with that of the student from the Department of International Business. So can we randomize these 2 groups of people, students? Of course not. So we need to match. We use matching. Matching is something that we can use for our human beings because no one likes to be selected randomly, right? So we group here. This is the group 1. So if I want to understand your learning efficacy for your English proficiency in the 4 years, So what would be the most matching group that I can use to make it for the control? Well, maybe the students from the international business, right? So one class and one class. You share similar characteristics, but you are not selected by randomization. Okay? So basically here what you need to know is that when we think about research design, you have to appreciate, you have to consider the possibility of threats there. That is, another way to think about this is the result of your study is never definite. Never definite. Just like as I say, I have a very beautiful ways of teaching, right? Experiment, control group. And before the experiment, you take a test, 64, 65. And after the experiment, and the post-test, you get 85, and normally I would expect that should be 65, 75, 80, right? Lower than 85 anyway. But sometimes you will be surprised to find out this is 89 or 92. Wow, what happened to that? Okay? Even this can surprise you. And how about this? May surprise you either, right? 2. And how about this? 45. There must be something out there. Not because of your teaching. Not because of your teaching. Because throughout the experiment and the control process, you can imagine that 18 weeks of time, many things can happen. Many things could happen throughout the way. And those many things are threats. Okay? So basically, when we try to design, to figure out research design for our study, we always need to understand the very high possibility of threats that can sabotage the study, the finding of our study. Okay, very careful about this. And also, when we think about the design, research design, we always need to consider the control. Control is for the purpose of comparison. We need to compare and to know how well, how effective of our treatment is. Okay, so control and threats are two very basic concepts for research design. So far, are you with me? Okay, great. And let's talk about design. Now it's a real stuff. Basically, we have 3 general categories of research design: pre-experimental design, quasi-experimental design, and experimental design. We have 3 general categories. And the denotation for this one, we have X and O, right? X refers to treatment. Something happened, or test, or some input, something to access. For example, I want to understand my effectiveness of the new way of teaching research methodology, right? In the case, my new way of teaching research methodology is the treatment, X. So treatment, in our research design, we call active variable. Still remember that? Active variable, we can manipulate. So we manipulate, we put into the action. So this is called treatment. So treatment, and the sequence of this denotes the time order before and after the treatment, right? And what about O? O refers to observations. That is the time or the chance of the timing for us to collect data. Okay, so treatment and observation. There are a lot of different combinations out there. Treatment and the combination. Okay, and also let's move to the last part. Did you see R here? R refers to randomization. Randomization. And also the alphabets on the same row refers to one group, and this is another group. Okay? There are two groups. So here, how many groups over there? There are 4 groups, right? 4 groups. And this has only 2 groups, 1 and 2. 2 groups. Is that right? Okay. Okay. So now, these are the basic concepts, basic terms that we need to understand first. R represents randomization, and then each row represents one group, and the group with X in it are experiment groups. And the group without X is the control group. They are the control group. Okay, we still have 4 minutes before we have the break. So I give you 4 minutes to go over these jargon terms and remember it, because we need to use it later in the next hour. Okay. So basically, when you see O, it simply means that it is the timing you need to collect data. It is the place you need to collect data. For example, for this one, we have treatment, right? Treatment refers to anything happened, or any medicines inserted into the body of the mice, or a new way of teaching just given to you, treatment. So this means that before the treatment, we need to observe the data. After the treatment, we also need to collect the data. Okay, so O refers to the timing you need to collect data. Very simple, right? Okay. So all of this it's a very, very simple structure with just denotes by the symbol of X and O in R. So you will know what will be the timing you need to collect data. Okay, let's take a 10 minutes break. Star Trek. So we know R is for randomization, O is for observation, X is treatment. Each row represents one specific group, right? The group with X in it is a treatment group, it's an experimental group. And the group without treatment is the control group. So let's go to, we have 3 different design, right? We have a pre-experimental design, quasi-experimental design, and experimental design. Let's go to experimental design first. And throughout the way, you will grow your appreciation for the threats and the controls. And why do we want to have so many kinds of design? Okay, first, let's take a look about the pre-test, post-test control group design. So basically, just state the obvious. We have a pre-test, right? We have a post-test. We have a control group design. Very simple. Pre-test, post-test, control group design. And let's take a look. The first one, we have to focus on the way we have the 2 groups. Now, of course, it is through randomization, right? So all the characteristics of the experiment group should be equal to that of the control group, because we are using randomization. So they should be equal. Is that right? For example, we have a pool of 1,000 mice over there. And we want to select 2 boxes of the mouse with each 100 mouse. So we will randomly select 100 out of the 200 out of this and divide them into 2 boxes, right? If this process is done by random with randomization, then these 2 boxes of mice should be equal. Should be equal in all the variables you consider in the experiment. Okay? And for this group, experiment group, we use X. We will put an X up there. That is, they will receive the test. This group will receive the treatment. Okay? So before you have the treatment on the experiment group here, you take a test, pre-test. This is so-called pre-test. Okay? And you implement the treatment. Then after you finish the treatment, you have another test we call post-test. Pre and post, before and after, right? So this is a pre-test, post-test control group design. It's a scientific research. In many different kind of natural science study, they are using this kind. Why? Because mice can be randomly selected, right? But we are human beings. It's very difficult, right? But for now, let's just introduce this to you. So let's see. For example, just as my example about the new teaching methodology, right? Imagine this, if you all agree to be randomized or selected, so we have 2 groups here, 21 students in this group, and another 20 students in this group. So you take a pre-test, we have 44, we have a 64 for this, we have 65 for this, for the experiment, for the control group. And then we have a treatment. So that is my new way of teaching, right? So after the semester, we have 85 in average, and for the control group, we have a 75. Okay, so based on this, we will be able to compare the effectiveness of, be able to decide the effectiveness of the new teaching method. Is that right? Theoretically. Of course, I have talked about the threats, possible threats, that may undermine or impact the significance of the results. So, but for now, let's put it aside. But for this design, did you find any problem for this? We may encounter one kind of threats. What is that? That is pre-test, post-test. This is pre-test, this is post-test, right? So if I give you a test with the questions, you may have some memory. Is that right? You may have some memory. And you may be encouraged or you may be motivated to study harder, right? For example, you took the test and you remember the contents. So this kind of pre-test will have some influences on your performance on the post-test. That's for sure. Let's give you another scenario. If this is only conducted in 3 hours of session, so before the teaching for 3 hours, I give you a test. So you have a pre-test, right? And after 3 hours of teaching, I give you another similar test, the same test. Will you remember the questions? Most likely you will, right? So this is called as pre-test threat. The threat of taking pre-test. So the threat of taking pre-test, sometimes we think we want to get rid of this kind of test. So let's take away pre-test. So we don't want pre-test. Can we do this? Yeah, because there is another kind of experimental design we call the post-test only control group. See, we have a post-test, right? And a control group only. So post-test only control group design. Ooh. What is good for this one? We do not have pre-test. And both are equal. So the difference between post-test should be identifiable to understand the effectiveness of the treatment. For example, if we get 85 here, this is 85. This is 85, and the post-test for the control group is 75. Wow, we can say, the treatment make a 10 points difference. It's good, right? But what's wrong with this? Although we are able to get rid of the threat for pre-test, but we do not, in this case, we do not have the baseline. We do not know when do they start. What is the point they start, right? So look here. In this design, in the pre-test, post-test control group design, we have a baseline to begin with. So we know the difference between 65 and 85. We know there's an advancement of 20 points. We know that. And 65 to 75, so look here. 65, we have a 65 to 85, okay, great. And 65 to 75. In this case, in the pre-test, post-test design, control group design, we have the baseline to compare. We know how much improvement the treatment can do to this experiment group, right? Okay, great. But we know there is a pre-test threat out there. So we try to use the post-test only control group design. So now we have X, we have 85 and 75. We know it makes a 10 points difference, but we have no idea about when did it start. Okay, so this has threats. This does not have an internal so-called pre-test threat, but both of them have some kind of shortcoming, drawbacks, right? Okay, although these two designs are good in their different ways, but can we have a more comprehensive ones to make that we can have a baseline and also we can consider, we can get rid of the threat for pretest? Yes, we can have the so-called Solomon full group design. So you can see basically we combine two different designs together. One here, right? and 2 post-test only control group here. Do you see all of this? 别玩手机了。Okay, do you see the difference? So the purpose for this design is to get rid of the pre-test threat and also has the advantage to know the baseline. They just combine together, okay? And what about the meaning for this Solomon 4-group design? This is the utmost research design for all scientific study. If we can do it, of course, we like to do it, right? But we have 4 groups, 2 experimental group and 2 control group, right? It takes money, resources. And sometimes this is very difficult to implement in our society for human beings. It's very difficult, impossible, right? The impossibility comes from 2 considerations. One, ethical issue. Ethical issue. We do not want to harm people, right? So imagine it would be very difficult for this one. And the second one, in our human society, it would be very difficult to use randomization. Randomization. Very difficult. However, in our social study, we still try to identify the causal-effect relationship. For example, over here, the difference between these 2 is highly attributed to the effects of the treatment, right? We can do, so X is the cause. The difference between 85 and 75 is the result, causal effect relationship. Is that right? So in natural science, we can use this to determine the causal effect relationship. But this is for natural science. But how about social science? We know randomization is very difficult to implement. But we still want to pursue the understanding for causal effect relationship, right? So we have another set of experimental design we call quasi. This is quasi-experimental design. Quasi-experimental design, it means half. It has the characteristic of experimental design, but not really strict. But still, you can use the design to identify the cause and the impact of the cause to the results. Okay, so we have 3 kinds of quasi-experimental design. What are they? First one, we call the non-equivalent group design. Non-equivalent means there are 2 groups here, right? 1 and 2. We have 2 groups. One group receives the treatment. The other group does not receive the treatment. But did you see the R here? There is no R here, right? No R. So they are not selected through randomization. They are not. But how can we have these 2 groups of, one is the experiment group, the other one is the control group. How can we select? Basically, we use matching. Match. We match these 2 groups. Okay, match 2 groups. How can you decide the match is reasonable? In statistical analysis, in natural science, we can use randomization because the number can tell the story, right? But how about in this kind of quasi-experimental design? How can you match this experimental group and control group together? How? You need to have the evidences through literature. Very important. You do not just combine, you do not just match 2 groups together and say, hey, these are the 2 groups. No, you have to match them with the evidence supported by the evidence of literature. For example, here. Okay. We know that in our department, we have a very intensive English taught lessons available for students coming here, right? So most of the courses are taught in English. So this is our treatment. Is that right? And we want, as a professors and also as a student or the school administrator, we would very like to know one thing. Is that useful to enhance your English proficiency? Right? Okay. So now, how can we identify the effectiveness of this kind of treatment? Well, in our study, we may be able to do something. First, we need to find a control group that we can make the comparison. So what would be which department or what kind of group can be used for control group? We look around the school. The Department of International Business. Maybe, right? They are similar to the entrance level, the entrance records of their examination when they took the test were about the same. The profile of the students were about the same. The records from the Office of Academic Affairs show that the students' profile from these two departments are about the same. Okay, great. Okay, so now we match. This is DIA, us. We are the experimental group because we received the intensive English taught courses, right? And the other one is Department of International Business, DIB. And how can we manage this group of people? Well, because the records, the literature says so. We have evidence. We have a lot of evidences from the records in the Office of Academic Affairs, and we can have our understanding. So evidence, we match. So we match these two. But now, look here. In the 4 years, you receive the treatment. They do not receive this treatment, right? So they don't have. But still, according to the non-equivalent group design, do we need to take data collection before the treatment? Yes, of course, right? So what would be the better data that you think of can represent the English proficiency of one student? Every time before you came to Wenzhou, you will go to the English camp, falling in love in English camp, right? And you would also take the English test, CSEPT, right? So you take a test. Oh, great. So we have a pre-test. So this is the pre-test. We have 1 and they have 1. And after 4 years of education, you will get a highest score, right? CSEPT. And they have their score. Is that right? So let's imagine this. Suppose this. For DIA, the pre-test and post-test is 220. And after 4 years of education, you got a 250 in average. And theirs is 215. And without English intensive courses for the 4 years, the highest average score for the DIB is 225. Can we have some inferences from these results? Can we establish some of the causal effect relationship of the treatment that we did here in the Department of International Affairs? Yes, of course. But still, we have to consider threats, right? Threats. That is, maybe you have more incentive to learn English. Maybe they do not have. Maybe you are immersed in an English taught environment. You know that it's very important to use English daily. They do not have that. Maybe there are many different consideration variables out there that may influence the result of the study. But still, we can use this design. non-equivalent group design to understand to some extent, remember, to some extent, the effectiveness of the treatment. Okay? So, this is part of the social study. So with this design, we still can understand how good is this one. Is that right? Although it's not that accurate, but still we can use this to infer the inference of the X toward the difference between the post-test score. Is that right? Okay, great. So this is non-equivalent group design, and the reason we can use the two groups is because we have done a matching. And the matching is based on the evidences provided by the literature. Because we cannot use randomization. Is that right? Because the students in DIA is there. Students in the DIB are there. There are no way for us to select randomly, but we can match. We can match. Okay? This is non-equivalent group design. With this one, we can know the effectiveness of the treatment to the differences of the observations on the two groups. The second one we call cohort design. Cohort design, what does that mean? Did you see how many groups are there here? How many groups? Cohort design, how many groups here? Actually, we still have two groups, right? Because there are two rows, 1 and 2. Okay, one group and the other group. Which group is the experiment group? The later one. Is that right? This one is the experiment group. And this is the control group. This is a control group, right? Okay. How can we apply this design? Okay. Now, as I say, this year, I have a new methods of teaching methodology. It would be unethical for me to divide you into two groups, right? So the only way I can do is teach you all with my new research methods. So this is my teaching. And after a semester of education, you will, after the test, you will receive the score, right? Okay, so example, your score is 85. But your score is 85 after my experiment. As you already understand, I need to have a control group so I can compare the meaning of the 85, right? So who can become the control group? Well, the students in last year, in the same class. Can we use that? They receive, the students in the last year, they receive the same, not the same, they receive the traditionally old one of teaching, right? So they have their score. Suppose their score is 75. So 75, our new score, new method produce 85. So we can roughly know the difference of 10 points has some coming on some of the effects of the treatment. Is that right? So we can compare one. I do have a new stuff. I want to know how effective it is. So you will have a score eventually. But I need to compare the score to understand the effectiveness of the treatment, right? So the only thing I can count on is the previous record for the last year. So there are still two groups, right? Two groups. So here, this is experiment group. Experiment group. And this one is control group. So we still have two groups. Okay? So this is called cohort design. 队列设计. Like a line on the row, right? 1, 1, 1, 1. Line on the row. Okay. And the third kind of quasi-experiment design is called time series design. Time series design. We have a treatment here, right? We would like to know the effectiveness of the treatment on the different issue, different observations. So how can we do this? how can we decide the X, the effective index here? So we need to collect data from the interval of time. For example, we collect quarterly data, 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters. So there are a lot of data we collect. And after the treatment, we also collect the same series of data. Okay, then what will be that be? Well, basically it will be something like this. Let's say in 2008, Lehman Brothers bankrupt. Okay, is that right? Bankrupt, and we collect data. Let's say just use GDP or let's say growth rate, the annual rate for the worldwide. Okay. And let's say this is 7, 6, 5, 4, and so on. And this is 9, 10, 11, and 12, and so on. Right? Okay. So we collect data. And now we collect growth rate. Growth rate. This is let's say 1%, 2% worldwide, 3%. Okay. Let's suppose this. So we collect data. Before the bankruptcy of the Lehman Brothers, and we collect a series of data, we found out that the average growth rate worldwide is around 2.5. This is one observation, and even in the Lehman Brothers, that is one observation. Okay. And after the treatment of Lehman Brothers, we have another set of observations. We found out that the observation here, even here, here, and here is negative, right? Okay. Did you see the two different patterns? The trend are different. Before the Lehman Brothers crisis, the trend is about this, something like this, right? And afterward, it's kind of going down this. Did you see the different trend? Okay, now I'm going to ask you one question. In this case, which set of data is the experiment group? Which one is the experiment group? When we say experiment group, it denotes that this group received the treatment. Is that right? So in this case, which part of data reflect treatment group? Okay, this way, right? Okay. So now it's great. Everything here represent treatment group. And we know that if we want to understand the impact of the treatment, we need to have a control group for comparison. Is that right? Okay, then we have a control group here. So you can identify the different trending pattern out there. And you know it is because of the treatment, right? And here it's very important to keep in mind. How can you use this time series design and to determine the effectiveness of the treatment toward the observations? You have to use literature. In this case, we say that the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers has caused the economic crisis, right? So it changed our economy, our global economy a lot. So if the literature supports this kind of hypothesis, and if the literature review after you review the literature, there are very strong evidences that suggest this kind of causal effect relationship, then you can put Lehman Brothers as the treatment, right? I'll give you another example. You will see it's a little bit difficult to establish this kind of inference. For example, in 2005, Taipei City has a global World Flower Exhibition. 2005, okay? Great. So let's use another example for this one. Okay, this is 2005. And there is the World Flower Exhibition. Okay. Can you, now I'm going to give you a research purpose. My purpose is to identify the impact of World Flower Exhibition on Taipei's democratization, the process of democratization. Can I do that? Look here. This is the one instant, right? It just happened there. Of course, when we think about how Taipei is growing into a democracy or something else, we will be able to collect a lot of data before the time and also after the time, right? Of course. But we cannot find any evidences from the literature suggest that this is the cause and this is the effect. We cannot. So you cannot just put a very simple event over there to say, oh, everything changes because of this. Just as I say, if I want to do a study, the influence of my teaching on your life growth in the future. Can I say that? No, I'm just one of the many inputs into your life, right? So Daniel's teaching here, yeah, I know it should be important, but can I change your life at all? Of course not. I can collect your data before. I can collect your data after, right? And if I find out there's a pattern of the change, I would say, can I say that it's because of me? No. Why? Because there are no literature, no evidences from the literature. So in qualitative research, in the so-called quasi-experimental design, you have to establish a theoretical foundation for the causal effect relationship before you can put the X inside the design. So literature is very important, okay? Evidence is from the literature. So don't just put anything else here to say this is the cause and that should be the result. No, not that. Okay? For example, I can give you more ridiculous examples. The impact of your lunch on your career development. Have you seen that? The lunch you will have, of course, is in an instant, right? A treatment. But there should be nothing related to your career development. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. But still, you can use the design to collect a lot of data, right? So remember, you need to have the evidences from the literature review to establish the causal effect relationship in quasi-experimental design. You have to be very careful about this, okay? You cannot just put any X there and to say, hey, this is something I want to collect. No, far away from that, okay? Okay, so quasi-experimental design are used for us to establish the effectiveness of the X treatment. Because in social science, social study, we are also interested in identifying causal effect relationship. But in our social studies, for many times, we do not intend to identify causal effect relationship at all. We only want to know what. Is that right? So now, if we only want to understand what it is, then we have a set of experimental design we call pre-experimental design. That is before, there's nothing related to experiment. When we want to do experiment, we have an experiment group and a control group, right? In this case, look here. Experiment group here, and this is control group. Experiment group here, and this is the control group. And this case, experiment group here, and this is the control group. Is that right? Whenever we try to establish the causal effect relationship, we need to have a control group. And of course, we have to make sure the treatment here is based on literature. If the literature indicates, strongly suggests that the causal effect relationship is there, then you can use, okay? But how about this? Let's look here. Pre-experimental design. We have only one group. We have only one group, but we do not have the control group. Although this is what's happening here, right? And this is happening, and this is before and after. This is happening with different groups. That's it. So this kind of pre-experimental design can only be used to answer what question? Okay, what about this one? This is used to answer one question. What is this after that? That is, what is this after that? Okay? What is this after that? And what about the second group? The one group pre-test, post-test design. It is a non-experimental design. When we say pre, it can be also, there's another term for this. We call non-experimental design. Not. N-O-N, non-experimental design. So they are not for experiment. So since they are not for experiment, they do not need a control group. So they do not have a control group. But let's look at here. We have the treatment, right? We observe before, we observe after. So this kind of can be used to answer one question. What is the change of this after that? Is that right? So we compare the change. What is the change before? What is the change of this after this? The change. So basically, this one is used to answer what it is. What is it? And this one is used to answer what is the change. And how about this one? We are trying to understand the difference, right? So basically, we are only asking what is the difference. That's it. Straightforward, very simple, right? Very simple, very simple. Let you have a name. The one-shot case study. What is it? Okay, if I want to conduct the study to understand, to investigate the level of your understanding on environmental protection, then I can use the one-shot case study. Look here. I want to investigate your level of understanding about environmental protection, right? So, what is the treatment here? The treatment is the environmental protection. Environmental protection happening here. Once the environmental protection happen here, then you will look at the issue and you have some idea, right? So it happened, I ask your opinion. So I will conduct a survey. Is that right? I will give you a questionnaire or I will interview you. Everything is done after you have the idea of environmental protection. Is that right? Okay. And how about this one? One group pre-test, post-test design. It applies to the change. Okay, then what about this? We have a 9/21 September 21st earthquake in Taiwan, right? When was that? 2000. It's 1999. 1999. Were you born yet? No, not yet. Really? Wow, that was cool. That day, I just landed in Washington, D.C. So actually, I did not experience a real earthquake at that time. But when I landed in Washington, D.C., and the attaché from our embassy, they came to receive. And at the same time, all their cell phone rang out to inform them there was a huge earthquake at that time. So that's how I know. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. So let's look, what is the change, right? This is the earthquake. We can ask, what is the change of population in Nantou City after the 9/21 earthquake? Is that good? So what kind of data we need to collect? Basically, first, we need to go to the government archive to retrieve the number of population before the earthquake. One shot, one time, right? And after the earthquake, we retrieve the same data, another data after earthquake. So let's say before the earthquake, we have 1 million. After the earthquake, we have 990,000. So there is a difference. So we have a difference for 10,000 people died over there. Very easy. So when you want to answer what is the change of something, this is very useful. This is very useful, right? Okay? And what about the statistic group comparison? This one? Well, it's almost the same. You can compare. For example, Taipei City, different cities have a different welfare programs for pregnant women. Okay, if you have one child in Taoyuan, let me recall, you will receive $5,000 from the city government for each month for you to raise your kid. That's Taoyuan, right? But in, let's say in Taitung, you receive 1,000, 5,000, 1,000, right? So basically, the X can represent the higher payment for the welfare money for the pregnant women, for the young mother who has kids, right? Okay, so this is receiving 5,000. So this is Taoyuan, this is Taitung. Okay, Taoyuan and Taitung. Taoyuan receive the Taoyuan money. Taitung does not receive the Taoyuan money. So they do not have X. Is that right? Okay. So can we compare, for example, can we compare the difference of the children they have? The average number, right? For example, in Taoyuan, we found out that each family has 2.2 kids. But in Taitung, because they receive less money, so they have 1.1 kids. Okay, the difference that, right? But can we say that the difference is caused by X? No, not really, because we do not have the pretest group. We do not have pretest for us to compare. So not really. It just says the differences. So basically, in the non-experimental design, we have no way to establish the causal effect relationship. We have no way to do that. We only describe what it is, what is the change, and what are the differences. Okay? And remember this. Although we list only 2 groups here, can we have many different groups? Can we have many different groups? Yes, of course, right? Taoyuan has Taoyuan money. Taitung does not have Taoyuan money. And Kaohsiung does not have Taoyuan money too, right? Either. So actually we can have 3 groups. What are the differences? And we can have 5, 7, of course, provided that they are all static groups, because there are different groups there. So we are only focused on differences. Some students may argue, we can compare the difference of pre-test and post-test and identify the effectiveness of X, right? Okay. Remember that when we want to identify the effectiveness of the treatment, we need to have a control group, right? Did you see a control group here? There's nothing for you to compare. There's nothing for you to compare. So since there are no control groups, then there's no way for you to identify the effectiveness of the treatment. So remember, this can be used to answer what? First one-shot case study, what it is. One group pretest post-test design, what is the change? And the last part, the state group comparison, is to identify what is the difference. And let me ask you one more question before we dismiss the class. Which one is better? Well, this is a very lame question. Why? Because everyone is good, so long it fits your needs. Everyone is good as long as it fits your needs. If you want to do a study about, for example, people's idea about, let's say, the abolishment of death penalty, what kind of research design you need to use? Very simple, this one, right? Abolishment of death penalty, how people think about that. That's it. Okay, this is the only thing you need. You don't have to count down a very sophisticated design using this. Very strange, right? Okay? So you have to keep in mind that the different kind of research design is only useful for your own research question when you find a suitable one. So when we try to determine which one is better than the other one, you ask one simple question. What do you want? What do you want? That's it. If you only want to know what it is, then this one is perfect. Right? If you only want to know what is the difference, how about this one? If you want to identify the change of something, this one is good. Good enough. Okay? Good enough. You don't have to count down this. Wow, let's go something for this. It's very difficult for social study, really, very difficult. Okay? And now I'll go to the last part. Next time we will do our quiz number 6, and there's a research portfolio for you. It's a very good time for you to synthesize everything you have in the previous 4 assignments, including research problem, relative concepts, indicators, and variables, research hypothesis, and research question. Try to put them in one piece. And some of you may consider rewriting or going to finding another set of research graduation paper topic for yourself. Do it as soon as possible. You can change, of course, you can change, okay? And once you have identified, consolidate everything here, so far you're here, then you should be able to choose your research design and explain your rationale. And in this case, you need to go back to have the reading. Read it by yourself, okay? Read it and try to identify your research into a proper research design. We have 9 kinds of research design, right? Into 3 basic categories. And try to identify it. Which one your research topic may belong to. Okay? Any question? So next time we'll check on yours, your portfolio to see whether you have a right selection. It's a good time for you to think about this. Okay? And also, we have a practice by using the impact of algorithm on the family, right? Why do I want to do this? Because I want you to think about, again, the research hypothesis and research questions you have put in the previous portfolio. Is that right? Have you followed the same rationale to create the research hypothesis? Double check it. Make sure you are on the right track. Okay, can you do that? Okay, then I will see you next time and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you very much. Thank you.